Hi there. Yeah, so my name is Mario Wynands. I'm the managing director of PikPok, which is a developer and publisher based in New Zealand. We've worked with a lot of movie IP over the years, and some of it has been great experiences, some not so much, but it's certainly been very interesting nonetheless. We've got a great panel here today, and I'll speak to them quickly, but let them introduce themselves and speak quickly to the movie IPs that they've worked with. So to my right, I have Ringo Chu from CMGE. I have Saikala Sultanova from Space 8 Games. And on the end there, Devin Radford from FoxNext, right? It's the division?
It is now.
It is the division, the newly formed FoxNext. So Ringo, can you just talk a little bit about CMGE and what movie properties you've worked with, or TV properties?
So I get okay, so I work for China Mobile Games and Entertainment Group, which is CMG in short. We are a major mobile game publisher and developer in China and have offices in different countries like Korea, Japan, and I'm based in Toronto. So we are actively seeking, mobile games from the West to publish in China. And on the other hand, we are also chasing world-class original IPs, including Hollywood movie IPs, to making new mobile games. In the past, we published two third-party mobile games based on Hollywood IPs. One is The Minion Rush from Gameloft, which is based on the movie Despicable Me. Another one is Star Wars Commander from Disney. Apparently, that's on the movie franchise Star Wars. And last year, we also got license from Skybound for the Walking Dead IP, which is very hot and popular comic books and a TV show from Hollywood.
Hey, I'm Saikala from Space 8 Games. We're based in London. That's the only studio we have. We always published our own IPs, but last year we've been fortunate enough to publish Transformers game, Transformers Earthworld. So that's my only experience with anything that's that famous and big, and I hope I can bring some insight today.
Hello, I'm Devin Radford from FoxNext Games, which is the video game division of 20th Century Fox. We are primarily a licensing group. We publish games with our partners from the entire catalog of 20th Century Fox film and television properties. So, you probably know some of our films and TV shows like Avatar, Ice Age. We recently released a game for Office Space, a game for Family Guy. So we have an extensive catalog, and we look for best-of-breed partners to publish, develop and publish our games in partnership with us.
So a question for Ringo to start with. You have a very large portfolio of games. Why are you pursuing movie licenses and TV licenses? Why are you pursuing licenses as part of your portfolio strategy?
Well, that's a very good question. That because in the Chinese market, if you look into the top 10 chart on iOS or Android, most of the games, like RPG card games or strategy games, are self-developed, self-owned IPs. But we're still chasing external IP because that definitely add value and give us some extra advantages, like the brand strengths, like the promotion and marketing effort. So that's why we keep, seeking external top-notch IPs. That's our long-term strategy.
So you find it's a lot easier to generate buzz and downloads with a movie IP over an original game?
Yeah, that's very true. Let me take the Minion Rush for example. That's a game published like almost 2 years ago. So it generated like 2 million downloads on the first day of launch. And Star Wars Commander is also very good. So with a similar download number, and revenues are also great.
Saikala, a question for you. So you have a much smaller portfolio, but you decided to develop a licensed game. Why did you decide at that point in time for the studio, which had such a small portfolio, to move into doing a licensed product?
That was, it was more of an opportunity when Hasbro came to our founders and asked, you build great games using Unity for both iOS and Android. Would you like to build another Transformers games? And of course, our founders probably took time 3 seconds to think about it. Yeah, of course we're going to do it. I think the big part of the reasoning behind it was to develop something and see, how can we not only develop games, strategy games for our own IPs, but also can we leverage our experience and art and graphics and everything that we do, all the fancy stuff, and can we actually leverage that and make it even better and bigger with an IP behind it? And it proved to work. It was one of the most successful launches that we had last year, and with all the difficulties and advantages, it's been good.
Right. Well, we'll talk about those difficulties and advantages in a second. So Devin, you're on the other side of the table here, and are probably approached by a lot of different companies. You mentioned before you're proactively seeking partnerships with best-in-breed developers and publishers. When someone comes to you with an idea or an opportunity to use a license, what are you looking for? How does that conversation start?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that, Mario. So it happens in a lot of ways. I think, the number one thing we're looking for is passion for the IP and sort of a good understanding of the world and the characters. I don't think there's any situation where you can have a successful licensed game unless the team that's building it has a good understanding and a strong sort of passion to create the content. That's probably best evidenced by our game with TinyCo, our Family Guy, the Quest for Stuff game. We had a big process for that game that involved some of the top game publishers at the time, and they were sort of a small company coming in. I think the safer bet would have been to go with one of the big publishers, but they demonstrated incredible passion for the IP, unbelievable encyclopedic knowledge of the jokes from the show. They blew they blew our minds with their presentation, and we gave it to them just based on that. There's a number of other factors that go into it, but I think that at the core is the most important thing when you're trying to make content like video games with big IP.
And just to touch on you being proactive side, how do you discover the sorts of developers that you want to work with? Is it just a process of looking at the App Store and kind of seeing what's out there and reaching out via email?
Yeah, I think you probably, I've been out in the market for probably 4.5 years. I think we're probably the most proactive studio looking for partners. We've got a business development team that basically goes to every conference, and yeah, of course it's easy to look on the App Store and see who's on the top grossing charts or top free and reach out. But I think, our team is, we've got a games team which we built over the last 4 years. So we're not a traditional studio, group. We have our own sort of office. It's separate. It's a very, very games-focused group. And so we're always playing games. And when we see a game that might fit, I probably reached out to you because of one of your games way back in the day. But Monsters at My Condo, I bet, was the one, I think. Anyway, sorry. But we'll find really good content. And we'll say this is high quality. And maybe the game genre will fit really well with one of our IPs. And so, yeah, we'll reach out and see if there's a good content partnership we can create.
So, Ringo, there are so many different licenses out there, so many different movies. How do you identify which properties you want to work with, and then how do you evaluate the potential or the value that license might bring to the table so you can start a negotiation process?
Yeah, like I said, to working with top-notch IPs is our long-term strategy. So we do have a quite mature process set in place. So to evaluate the external IPs, I think we are doing both qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis. And we do have internal evaluators and external third-party data analytics service to help us to make the decision. So with regard to the qualitative analysis, I think that's to really analyze if that IP fit with your pipeline, your preference on the game genre and gameplay, and the strengths of your development team. So for example, I think some Western horror films may not be good to create great mobile games in China. And we prefer that movies can be well translated and converted to RPG and strategy games, as well as some casual games like running games, like match 3 games. So with regard to the quantitatives, you have to look into the very specific figures like box office global and box office in China. And we also look into the data from the major search engine like Google, like Baidu, to see the quantity of the keyword search of the movie, which reflects the popularity and trending of the movie IP. And some other data like, we also emphasize on the prequels and sequels of the movie, like how many prequels have been released, and how the plan for the next few years, will there be any sequel to the movie? Because we prefer a long-term, movie IP franchise, which can maintain the popularity over the time, not just for maybe 1 or 2, then that heat die away. Yep, that's it.
We prefer those too.
Okay.
So, Saikala, looking at developing your first licensed game, then moving from a place where you'd only developed original IP, what challenges did you face in creating your first licensed product, and were there unexpected things that you didn't foresee that came with that development?
Well, I think there were a couple of things. When initially, as I mentioned earlier, we agreed to develop a game, next Transformers game, and everyone was excited about it. And because we were thought, yeah, real-time strategy, we can do it with closed eyes, reskin, and just put Transformers on it. It did not work. We made a prototype, we run a few things, and then we understand, no, by we, I mean the product side, they understood that it's not just enough to reskin the game and put Transformers on it. Just visuals are not enough. We needed to understand the gamers, the fans, Transformers fans, because there's quite a deep engagement with the storyline behind it and characters themselves. There's a big and long legacy, and we needed to understand that. So we then redid the game and story behind it, and we put more emphasis on Transformers themselves, also the characters behind them, and that also went with searching the audience, seeing which Transformers characters are more popular in which countries and so on. That changed the game in a different way, that it wasn't enough just to build another RTS. It has to be really, really connected and strong with Transformers storyline itself and the brand also. And going back to what other challenges that we had, I think that's one of the common challenges, and I think there's no way around it. The approval processes, because it's quite an old IP and it's established, it has its own processes. Typical example of creative for advertising that we use, user acquisition, or even creative and art for inside the game visuals. It takes some time to do that, so it took us, because we are still not, we're 100 people, so we're not massive, but we're not too small. And we still like to move fast and change things. And it took us some time to get used to the process, that there is an approval process, that we are not just, we can't do things and change things in 1 or 2 days. So that was one of the things that we had to get used to, and now we know that's a process.
So it sounds like that might have impacted your live ops process as well, if things take time to turn around a little bit more.
At the beginning it did, just because we were not used to that. But then we kind of worked out our schedule. So we were planning way ahead than we normally would do. And now it's just fine, because we already know what next coming in, I don't know, 6 weeks or so. So if we have 2 weeks approval process for video creatives or anything to do with live ops, we already know there's a pipeline. So we need to be a lot more organized than we normally are.
Right.
Yeah.
Devin, starting to talk about a deal. You know, how are these things normally structured, and what types of restrictions might developers see around how they can approach the IP creatively and the types of approval processes that Saikala mentioned?
Yep. Excuse me. So everything Saikala said was music to my ears. That's great. Well, except for the reskin part.
We didn't do that.
I know. I'm happy for you. No, so I think that everything that she said is what we want to hear. You know, I think starting with some of the things that Ringo touched on too is having a partner that's doing both qualitative and quantitative research, looking at the brand, looking at the characters, looking at where the audience, you know, the different regions that the audience responds to different characters, things like that. That's super important because you know, we've released pretty big games where our partner has not done that and where they have, and the difference is huge. So, you know, starting there and then moving toward creating the content specifically for the IP and really focusing on areas that make sense for the brand. That's all very lovely. I think that, like, you know, deal-wise, we've got deals on a very wide spectrum. You know, I think it really depends on the IP and what kind of stakeholders are involved. You know, how big the IP is, what kind of investment the developer, publisher is making in creating the content and the product. So the way that we look at a deal-making process is more like a college admission rather than rather than saying there's a price for this. So there's a lot of different factors that we take into account when we're negotiating the deal. So we have a pretty wide range. On the approval side, I mean, again, you know, I'm glad to hear you say that you've figured it out and built in a process. There is definite lead time when you're working with a brand. And I think, you know, when a developer first is working with them, it might be a surprise. And, you know, I think you just need to work, you know, with the partner and figure out what that lead time is and get the content pipeline going. Again, it depends on the game. When you're looking at a game that requires a lot of content, which is most free-to-play games today, you just really need to be smart about how you build it in, both in development, but especially in live ops.
I have a quick question. When you work with developers and you already have these sort of processes and waiting times and approval process, do you come up with, or do you have a template approach that you offer to, you know, make it easier for developers to get used to these things?
Yeah, I think so. It's not really a template because each brand is different. You know, the way that my group is structured is we're sort of the connective tissue between the actual IP holder, the IP owner, or, you know, whatever it may be, whether it's the creator of the show or the director of the film. If it's Ridley Scott, that's a more high-profile director as opposed to, you know, maybe a smaller television show that's off the air. But we try to facilitate the approval process and be as quick as possible. We understand the needs that a game developer has in turning things around quickly, not just on development, but also for ad creative. I mean, that's something that it really needs to happen quickly. And so, yeah, you know, it really depends, again, on the brand. Some stakeholders really need time, and we need to build that in ahead of time. Others sort of learn to trust us, and, you know, again, using TinyCo and Family Guy as an example, I mean, they've got a really good pipeline with Fuzzy Door. And they require approvals, but we've sort of hired someone over there that handles all the art and all the approvals. And so that pipeline goes really quickly. They've also, like, they don't make mistakes anymore because they've been doing it for like 4 years. So it's, you know, the line weights are not a problem and there's no issue. Getting through those kinks, especially on art, that takes a lot of time. But once you sort of establish the art style and the look and feel and everything, things get a lot smoother. And so now it's just like, yeah, things happen, you know, very quickly.
So, Ringo, you talked before about driving more downloads and driving downloads very quickly. That potentially leads to a lot of revenue. But what else does a license bring to your portfolio and your company? What other rewards are there for using big name brands?
Yeah, I think definitely in addition to the revenue and profit side, the developer does get benefits in terms of many ways, like intangible assets. For example, the brand image, the goodwill, the word of mouth, and they got recognition from both the industry and players. So those are extra benefits in addition to just making money. So let me take the Star Wars Commander, for example, when we work with Disney. So before and after we officially launched the game in China, we did quite a lot. We did quite a lot marketing and promotional events. So the game was exposed in the Star Wars official exhibitions in China and exposed in the Force Awakens premiere ceremony in Shanghai. And also, we had a joint press conference with Disney as China Joy. Also organized a large-scale, how do you call that, the cosplay show. And we also advertised and did the product in placement in a very popular TV entertainment show, which called Running Man. It's a very popular show, hot show in China, a TV network. So lots of things we can do and benefit from working with a top-notch IP and IP owner.
Saikala, you mentioned before there were some challenges there in working with your first license. As you kind of look ahead to maybe the next license game, are there things that you would do differently that you can talk about on camera?
Probably establishing a relationship with IP holder, not just on the top level, you know, leadership, C-level, and all of them, people, legal, who make a deal and sign the contracts and things. But I think next time, probably it would be good to also connect people on the ground. Because yes, you sign up a deal and you do all these things, and that's great on paper, but then people on the ground have to execute these things. And it may, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe next time we'll be proactive, because we know that, you know, some parts could be tedious on our side or their side. And I think a big part of it during the execution period, to make sure that people on the ground are also connected from the start, that we have unified plan, and that everyone is aware, because it would make it a lot easier and faster to move forward. And yeah, that's probably one of the things that would make it a lot faster and more efficient.
Following on from that, Devin, what sort of support can game developers expect from the creatives and the talent around the IP itself, from the marketing team that's engaged with promoting the IP in general and things like the movie? What sort of support can the developer get from the people on the other side of the line?
It really depends on the IP, of course, as always. But you know, I think at a broad level, you know, we've been able to integrate the IP, or sorry, the mobile game fully with a movie launch. You know, Angry Birds Rio was probably the best example of that, like 5 years ago now. Our Ice Age games, we tend to have a lot of support from theatrical marketing. But it's always a challenge. I think, you know, that's what we're there to do, is to connect the dots and make sure that we're hitting the calendar and all the marketing beats that the theatrical release is doing when we're talking about a movie. Television is actually a lot easier because we've got, you know, direct access. We've got, again, in our case, we've got access to a huge distribution network, not just Fox Broadcasting in the United States, but also our international channels around the world. So having that sort of weekly touch point for a lot of our brands is a lot easier to handle. But yeah, we're always trying to integrate the game as fully as we can into whatever, you know, whatever marketing beats are happening.
And following on from that then, how important is it for the game to hit a particular launch date and not miss that date, not be too early? Is there a perfect timing for a game to come out alongside a film? And when is an opportunity squandered if it misses that window?
I mean, this is trying to hit a theatrical release date. That's probably the biggest risk, like, that we have to deal with. when you're dealing with a brand like Transformers or something like Family Guy or, an Avatar or an Ice Age, those brands, I mean, they're evergreen and they're big enough that you can release and look for support from the App Store, but also, strong, launch plan will help you get the installs you need. But yeah, theatrical release, unfortunately, we've missed them before and we'll miss them again because just the nature of game development and the approvals process is difficult. So, I'm much more secure in releasing a game that's on the schedule of the development of the game rather than trying to hit a theatrical release. In a perfect world, yeah, you would release the game just before the film release when the market's saturated with all of our marketing, and sort of you're going to get the best featuring from the platforms, and also just visibility is highest. But can't always predict the release of a game.
So just throwing a question out there to everybody before we open up to the audience for questions. How do you see the landscape for licensed games changing, whether it be in the marketplace or the deal making, or how developers can collaborate with film and TV creatives? What should we expect to be happening over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, so I think in the future the movie makers will work much more closer with the game developers. So I can see maybe in 2 directions. One is that in the future, movie can be the game, and the game can be the movie, right? For example, they call that interactive narrative movie. So the audience have different options of the storyline to choose from. And another option is another direction is the VR, because VR will definitely be the game changer. So I think last year I was so impressed by director Eric Darnell's the VR short called Invasion. So it's so impressive. So the player can, when you immerse into that VR movie, you can choose which part you want to see. So you can turn around. So it's short, it's 5 minutes, but it's a big hit. So I think that's the future of the movie and gaming industry.
3 to 5 years, a long time.
It's a very long time, Mario.
Yeah.
Hey, these are the big questions we're putting out there to the panel.
In my opinion only, I'm not as experienced as you guys, but it looks like the world is moving towards celebrities, maybe. I mean, Kim Kardashian is one of those things. Not really a big fan, but look at the grossing charts, that's great. And then I guess lots of other celebrities would follow. In our case, we are trying to make it out of influencers. Let's see that works. I think something like that. Of course, big IPs, Star Wars, Transformers, and Family Guy, and all of these, when you have the actual TV show behind it, will always have a bigger reach, and I don't think that would tail out in the next 5 or maybe longer years. But yeah, that's pretty much my.
Yeah, 3 to 5 years, I don't know. We're certainly, so as at a corporate level, Fox is investing in video games. The new creation of my group, FoxNext, we're heavily focused on 3 areas. One is VR, where we have a studio. Another is location-based entertainment, which is theme parks and other things in the real world. And then the other is games. And the way that we're viewing video games is another platform to tell our stories. At our core, the business on the film and television side, we enable strong talent and creative to tell their stories, and we'll market and distribute those things and help them get them to market. And so that's no different with games, and that's how we're looking at it. So our investment and our involvement in this area is only going to increase in 3 to 5 years heavily. So we'll have some kind of mix of strong licensing business with the best partners. We'll probably go on new emerging platforms. We'll be involved, and with the goal of helping strong creative teams create good content and tell stories.
So throwing it open to the audience, any questions?
Hey guys, great panel. Ringo, this is actually for you. We find we've got multiple applications, and our biggest fans on one app generally play all of our games, our most engaged players play all of our games. Can you talk maybe what impact having Star Wars in your portfolio had to your other applications?
So the question is, what is the portfolio effect of having a licensed game in your in your portfolio? What's the amplification of bringing in those new players into your portfolio for Star Wars specifically?
So with regard to our portfolio, because like I said, we have in-house studios, and we published quite a lot of games. I think over 80 or 90 or 100 games. But
that's a lot of games.
Yeah, but for external IPs, we do have a long-term, strategy and plan for every year. We sign at least 1 or 2 big IPs. That can be from the Western countries or can be from Japan. We work with some top-level Japanese IPs like One Piece, Naruto, like Dragon Ball Z. So
when a player comes into your network and plays the Star Wars game, do you find that they go on to play other games in your portfolio as well?
I think that's about cross-promotion, right? Yeah. I haven't have that data for now, so sorry about that.
I guess maybe Saikala, did you find when you released the Transformers game, people went through to your other games as well?
Yes, actually, there is a correlation between that. Just for the fact, in Transformers, we don't promote our other games, Samurai Siege or Rebel Kingdoms, because of business deals.
So they don't let you do it?
There was no separate agreement to that as yet.
Got it.
Yes. So, but what we did see that was very obvious, especially during global launch, that some of our, let's say, big players, or not big players, some of our VIP players did go and play Transformers even during a soft launch. So naturally, because we have internal user ID that unifies not only across games and platforms, but also across devices. Some of them have few devices. So we did see some of them migrating for a short period of time, then coming back, and then going back forth again. Yes, we did see that. I don't think there was any cannibalization, just because each game is very different. And then after trying a few times, those kind of players, they usually stick to the one they love. Yeah, and then if they did love Transformers more, that's great for us. I mean, we don't care where they play, as long as they play, right? So as long as they like the game.
We've had strong feedback from our partners, some of our partners, to be honest. I think it really depends on who the publisher is, what type of games are in their portfolio. For you, sir, I think you're in the social casino business. I think if you look at our games with Jam City in particular, you can see that like funneling Family Guy users into their sort of ecosystem is, I think it will be a benefit. We've only released the game a few weeks, but yeah, we've seen lift in some of our partners. I don't have any data points to share with you, but if you send me an email, I'll give it to you later. But yeah, one of the drawbacks of being a license holder and not owning development or the customer for us has been that we haven't been able to take advantage of a portfolio. So something we'd like to do in the future. But yeah, we've had strong feedback from our partners.
I guess maybe to spin that question another way, have you seen strong cross-promotion from games out to the box office, out to DVDs, Blu-ray, merchandise, so you get those users into other expressions of the IP?
Yeah, definitely. I think I think we did some pretty cool ticketing stuff. It depends on the partner and the scenario. I think we've been challenged to get this together, but in the cases where things have worked, we've been able to drive ticket sales from the game, and that I think helps everybody. Integrating strongly with a film release is always great, but there's a lot of moving parts, and usually you're focused on trying to get the game out and have it be polished and of good quality. So there's challenges associated with it, but certainly we've driven to ticket sales and home entertainment sales as well.
This is Usman. I'm representing a casual game company. If we would like to have an IP, what is the business model?
I think
I can answer that question.
Yeah.
So again, it depends on what type of game you're talking about and what the size of the IP is, what kind of investment you're making, how strong the pitch is, what the team, who the team is that's building the game. So there's a whole bunch of things. But essentially, generally, it's a minimum guarantee that's recoupable with a back-end royalty.
I've got a question there. if a developer came to you for wanting to do a deal around a relatively dormant IP, is that something you'd actually say, no, you're probably not, or would you just do that deal?
Didn't you see the Office Space game that was released a month ago in App Stores now?
Well, yeah, actually, that, you know, and that's been doing really well.
What a wonderful game that is. So that's actually, I'm so happy about this game. You know, our friends at Congregate, we've been working with them a long time. They released our Animation Throwdown game, and they've got a little studio in San Diego called UltraBit. It's like 8 guys, really smart, awesome guys. And we were just talking about like old IPs that we could do something cool with. And they had their, you know, Pocket Politics engine. And so we started talking about an Office-based game where, you know, because it fits well with the incremental game, with the virus. I don't know, well, yeah, you have to know the IP. But in any case, they put together this amazing art style that was totally stylized and brought out the brand, but was something different. Everyone fell in love with it, and it was really great working with them. And fans are, it's funny, it's actually kind of mixed. We're seeing people obsessed with Office Space, so happy that there's content and they love the art style. And then there's the other half of them who just saw Office Space and downloaded it and are like, I don't understand this at all. What is this? And so we're hoping that some of those players end up, you know, becoming sort of idle game fans. I'm not holding my breath, but yeah, it's doing really well, and I think it'll continue to do well. I think it brings out a piece of the IP that I think people resonate with and really like.
So there's no opportunity that isn't worth a conversation, at least? Of
course not. Yeah, no, I mean, we've got a ton of great... Okay, I want to make a Home Alone game, if anyone is interested in that. I think there's a lot of great films that... Look, if you have the right size team and maybe the development budget, we don't need to do every game that's, you know, $10 million plus. We can do smaller games that, as long as it's true to the IP and the audience will resonate and get excited about it, we're down to do it.
Just a quick question. What do you prefer, casual games or hardcore games for developing our game about a specific IP? Or what kind of games do you think they will work better with the different audiences?
We're not making puzzle games with aliens. So that answers your question. No, I think that depends on the brand. So I think our portfolio in particular is varied. We've got Ice Age and Rio that are great for casual games, really accessible IP, beautiful art, and then we've got some of the best hardcore IPs like Aliens and Predator. New movies coming soon, and yeah, obviously we would look to do something that fits more with that audience, RPG strategy.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of different licensed games out there that sometimes don't fit. I think there was a Godzilla Match 3 game that came out against the, and maybe that wasn't hitting the right mark. So, but I think it's all about fit, right? It's about finding the right genre that matches the IP that will resonate with a particular audience. So.
It's like doing a running game for the Maze Runner was a good one.
Yeah. Rather than
it's a plug, shameless plug for a 4-year-old game.
Rather than a turn-based strategy game.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I wanted.
Hi. Is it always a global launch whenever you consider working with IPs? Because, for example, for some less popular IPs, it might be predominantly popular in a certain region, like, for example, in the Philippines. So if we consider working with large IPs, should we always look at a global launch?
So the question is when you release a licensed game, is it always a global launch, or with some IPs being stronger in particular regions, do you focus on that region first and then roll out the distribution as the game grows?
Well, that's a very good question. That first of all, it really depending on the license deal itself. What's the territories covered in the deal? That can be global, that can be in a specific countries. So because our next license game will be a global license, but we prefer not to launch simultaneously. We have a strategy to pick a few countries to launch first, then the next batch of countries, then that's a global launch. So it really depends. It's case by case.
I mean, we generally do global release, but in a lot of cases, we'll look to do a separate SKU for China and sometimes all of Asia. But it really depends on the IP and the game and the partner. But generally, it's generally like in Asia or China and the rest of the world, sort of carve out for us.
For us, it's quite simple. As soon as localization is done, and as soon as it's done well enough that we can go to another market. I think the longest for us usually takes East Asian markets when we need to localize in Japanese, Korean, and both of the traditional and simplified Chinese. So because there is a particularity, and it makes a big difference in those markets where there is a cultural difference with the font, the color, and style, and all these things, and make sure that that all fits within a small mobile device. For us, it's mainly localization, and as soon as it's up to par, then it goes out. Sometimes it goes out at the same time as a global launch, and then sometimes we have to delay it by a month or two to make sure it's quality.
In regards to the development pipeline, do you have a specific department that's responsible for research in order to make sure that the IP integrates fully into the game so that it resonates with the fans of the IPs, especially like big IPs?
So the question is, do you have dedicated staff that are researching the IP specifically, or are you using developers, just ordinary developers, to do their own research as part of their creative process?
Yeah, for us, we try to match it up. I mean, generally, we like to work with partners that have strong sort of market insights, and if you're going to be doing UA, and you should be doing that research, and so we try to match that up with the insights that we have. The kind of data we have varies from IP to IP. So bigger stuff, obviously, we have years and years of data that we can draw on. We've got insights from exit polls after film releases. So we try and bring that all to the table and hand it off, but it really depends on what we're looking at.
And so when you're working with different developers, do any of them have dedicated staff just focused on that one IP?
Yeah, bigger publishers do. We've also worked with ones that don't, and we've actually had some misses because of that. So I think not doing the right kind of market insight is detrimental, and we generally will look for our partner to have at least someone that's focused on that, or at least we can outsource it to do some qualitative and quantitative research before we release the game. Or you can just close your eyes and throw it at the wall.
What about your team, Saikala? Is there anybody or people on the team that had to immerse themselves in Transformers and they became the go-to Transformers guru within the team?
It usually sits on the product side. So anything to do with Transformers, user base, research, design and all of that. We also have lots of guidelines and helpful style guides from Hasbro, which always helps. But on our side, from marketing perspective, we do our research ourselves, make sure we reach out and see where can we go and market, where in particular platform and countries that people would like our game. We estimate and we do that, but that's part of the marketing. Everyone does the research. There is no particular dedicated person for this sort of, let's say, marketing analyst, but all of us have some sort of data background anyway, and we do that. The one thing that's quite helpful, and we have a dedicated person for that, is somebody who does research and analysis and market trends on the creative side. And that's helpful because it's tedious, it takes a lot of time, but to make sure your creatives work on the marketing side, you need somebody to sit day in and out and do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give your hand to the panel members.